Just how long is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's leash? Can he afford to screw up on this NFL draft? Let's get into it. All the rest of your questions on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers, you are the backbone of Locked On Vikings, and I love you so very much. If you are new here, a prospective everydayer, perhaps, you can find this show by searching it out anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Just search out Locked On Vikings. You can also find this show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, it is Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions. You can send me questions anytime. You can fill out the Google form in the show notes or shoot me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. And on Mondays, I'll always put out a call for questions. So you can just keep an eye out on that at my Twitter account at LukeBraunNFL. First question I'm going to answer today comes from Jack from St. Paul, who asks, the Wilfs gave Spielman a pretty long leash to find our franchise QB, allowing 2 failed draft picks, Teddy and Ponder, before he went out and signed Kirk. Do you think Kwesi's leash is shorter if the QB we draft this year doesn't work out, assuming we do draft one in the first round? That's such an interesting framing. You're kind of asking me to do like owner mood reporting, which I'm not qualified to do. But I'll do my best to try to like think through this with you. So with Rick, yeah, Ponder was a bad pick. Teddy, there is a little bit of what could have been with his leg injury or whatever. But yeah, let's just say, okay, you took 2 L's there. And then it was the Kirk thing that actually precipitated the end of the Rick Spielman era. So call it 3 quarterback decisions. One of them wasn't a draft pick. It was a signing, but same diff. And I think that there's a wisdom in that where, like, if you, like, in a lot of the places in the NFL, you get one quarterback. And if that quarterback, Ryan Pace got Mitch Trubisky. And Mitch Trubisky didn't work out. He did get the chance to draft Justin Fields, but he was already like well on the hot seat by then, right? Like the end had started. And a lot of GMs, you get you tie your entire career to that quarterback, right? But isn't that really unwise? As much as we want to be really punitive about this, right? Like with Ponder, right? He drafted Ponder. He should be killed for it. he should be dragged by horses until his skin is inside out. But like, if we take that take that to its logical conclusion, right? We hire a GM, he drafts a quarterback. If that quarterback is a bust, we fire the GM, we hire a new one, he drafts a quarterback, and so on. Then that means we will always necessarily, like by that condition, have to have a quarterback drafted by a GM who has never done this before. Unless we want to hire a GM who's been fired by someone else, which comes with all his own baggage, right? Those are your 2 options. You either get a retread or you have a GM drafting a quarterback for the first time. When have you ever been in your whole life the best at something the first time you did it? And doesn't that seem like you're kind of treading your wheels or spinning your wheels? Like, doesn't that seem like you're just toiling in the worst possible spot if we don't give GMs the same space to learn and grow and develop that we give to rookie players? So I don't know if that's necessarily wise. Now, how the Wilfs actually feel about it, who knows, right? And there is absolutely the idea that you're tying your career to this quarterback. And if they draft, say, Drake May, and then he's a spectacular bust and he totally falls apart, yeah, probably a lot of people are getting cleaned out, right? You're probably losing coaches, you're losing maybe front office staff, including GM, who knows? So I don't know where the Wilfs are at, but I guess that's the debate. How much patience do we want to give? And personally, I don't know. It's just a life experience thing. Like, you're never the best at something the first time you do it. So why would we guarantee that every single time we try to draft a franchise quarterback, it's done by a guy who's doing it for the first time? That just never made sense to me. And that's why I always think GMs need to have that longer leash. They need to have a couple of chances, right? Like your GM should have a decade of that team. And if that GM is missing on a couple of draft picks, guess what? Nobody misses on all of them. It is a long-term game. These guys are 55-45 with each other. So if one thing is a spectacular bust, it doesn't mean all the other things will be a spectacular bust. We need to think long-term, big picture when it comes to GM hire-fire decisions. You can't just say, that was a bad pick and I want to fire him. I'm looking at you, Tommy Bernard. Absolute bane of my radio listening experience as a teenager. Max asks, how nervous should we be about the Giants trading up for a QB and beating us out? Having the number 6 pick allows teams like the Cardinals or Chargers to get a top 3 wideout while still acquiring extra draft picks. Okay, so 2 things here. One, you kind of shot yourself in the foot with this question, the way you worded it, because that's exactly why the Giants might not do it. Because at 6, they can still get a top 3 wide receiver. And if they don't get a quarterback, their consolation prize is something they can be pretty excited about, right? They can be like super stoked on Roma Dunze or whoever. But the other thing is, so I don't know how worried I am because there's been very little reporting about the Giants, and the reporting that there has been about them trading up, I forget who it was. I super apologize. I want to say Albert Breer, but that might be wrong. Was that they would trade up, but only to 3. That there would maybe be competition for the Vikings to move up to 3. But if they move up to 3 with the Patriots and they take that one, then the Vikings are the team going up with the Cardinals or Chargers for number 4. And that the Giants just aren't that into JJ McCarthy. They would maybe take him if he fell to 6 to them. So he kind of is that floor. But there's also a lot of reasons for that to be smoke, right? Like that, there's a lot of reasons for that to not come from the Giants, but to instead come from a team that, say, the Cardinals or Chargers, that really wants to encourage everybody to say, you got to trade up past 6 and look, we've got a deal for you. But like, I don't know, it's hard to read those tea leaves and know what's real and what isn't. But if you do take the reporting at face value, that reporting says that the Giants would trade up to 3 for Drake May, but wouldn't necessarily get in on it for 5 or 4. They would take JJ if he fell, but otherwise they'd be perfectly happy taking a wide receiver. That's where I understand it to be. But again, what's real, what's fake, who is ever to say? 10 days left, everybody. Caleb Osagi asks, since JJ is in the loop with the QB plan or decision, do you think he has a preference? LSU guy. It probably just loves the LSU guy, honestly. Yeah, he's not a GM. He's a wide receiver. It's different. And I think keeping him in the loop is more about being transparent and sort of a sign of respect rather than saying, hey, Justin Jefferson, what would you do here? Like, I don't think, and if I recall when Kevin O'Connell said that at the I think it was at the owners meeting, he said, like, you know, we're keeping him in the loop. We obviously have to be respectful of like the people whose job it is to make this decision and let them do their job instead of just doing whatever the superstar receiver wants. But you still can say, hey, you know, here's what we're looking at. Here's what we think about doing. You know, here's where everything is at. Here's the guy we think you'll maybe be playing with, or maybe it's that guy, or blah, 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 you know. Don't want any surprises on him, right? And the Vikings do have, the Kevin O'Connell Kwesi Vikings do have kind of a history of just being communicative with their players when it comes to the draft. Stuff like, you know, calling Kirk Cousins and saying, we might take a QB this year. Rick Spielman did it too. Yancey McFrondo asks, what are the odds the Vikings already have a deal in place with Jefferson and are just waiting to announce it on draft night once they draft their QB of the future? All right, if I know anything about PR, if I know anything about media management, you'd never announce that on draft day. Draft day is where you want to dump something that you want to get buried immediately, right? Because then something crazy will happen on draft day, and then that'll be like, remember a couple years ago, there was that Aaron Rodgers to the Broncos rumor that came out on draft day and then got forgotten because because the Bears traded up for Fields and like stuff happened, right? Like it did not get the legs that it otherwise would have gotten if it were released on like a random Tuesday in May. That's where you want to bury stuff. But if the Jefferson extension, no, you make a whole week out of that. No, if you have the Jefferson extension signed and like in your lap, you hold that thing till a random Tuesday in May, so you can get a whole week of good content out of it and good PR, and you know get your press conferences and stuff. You don't want to bury that in the draft. Sam Delker asks, outside of JJ McCarthy falling down the board on draft night, can you envision a legit scenario where the Vikings keep their 23 pick yet still secure a top 4 QB? So I talked about this on Monday's show, And we talked a little bit about it on the Minnesota Football Party, the idea of potentially only using pick 11 to trade up and then maybe like a 2025 first and keeping pick number 23. So I did that, and it did feel just like I was cheating. It just felt like I was abusing the mock simulator and not doing a realistic outcome. So I don't know. And I also still kind of feel like 11 and 23 right now are going to be the more reasonable assets to give up. My guess is there's some smoke screen going on, but that's just a guess. Who knows? Maybe they could. I wouldn't guess it would, though. If I had to predict, I would probably say no. And that it's really about do they or don't they keep that 2025 first. That's going to be the asset that's interesting. They give that up, and then if they give that up, do they get it back, right? If they're giving 11, 23, and the next year first for pick 3 or 4 just straight up, or do they do it for pick 3 or 4 and then they get a second back or something like that? That like a significant asset, right? I'm not talking about like and then a 6-7 swap or whatever random crap they always throw in, but like something else coming back. That would be the intrigue. Got a lot more questions. Some of them are even not silly. So we'll get into those next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is online therapy made easy. Now, I have been a big proponent of therapy for years. I've been in it for years. It has been very helpful for me in just kind of organizing my mind and my thoughts and helping me grow as a person. And I strongly recommend it to everybody, no matter what your situation is, whether you think you need it or not. You have a whole bunch of problems, or if you're just into it for like maintenance. I strongly recommend it, and BetterHelp can help you get started. They are designed to be online and super flexible around your busy schedule. That's one of the biggest barriers to getting into therapy is people work all day. When do I make the time? And BetterHelp is made so that it can be flexible, so that you can do it from the comfort of your own home, so that you can design it around your lifestyle and make it work for you. Plus, they will help you get hooked up with a therapist that is right for you. And if you don't like what they give to you, you can switch at no additional cost. It's a really important part of it. So go to betterhelp.com/lockedon and get on your way to being your best self. Give online therapy a try once again at betterhelp.com, HELP/lockedon, and get on your way to being your best self. 6 o'clock Central Time. The Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel, you got to go tune in to the live Locked On NFL mock draft. All 32 of us Locked On hosts got together and did a mock draft with trades, with negotiations, with reactions from all of the local experts, including college football experts. The college hosts all weighed in on all of their players and even the fantasy football angle. Once again, that is streaming live on Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, or you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Let's move on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Oregon Mac, who asks, I decided to geek out on QB film and watched a bunch of Pocket Presence film breakdowns. That's Kurt Benkert's YouTube channel, I think. To be super honest, at least in the film Benkert reviewed, Spencer Rattler looked quite a bit calmer and better in context than May. I can't say I get the May steam. Why is everyone so high on him? Okay, so here's the thing, Oregon Mac. You have a scorching hot take there. And that's totally fine. You may have a scorching hot take. I'm not going to try to talk you out of that scorching hot take. You go take it to the bank, because if it's right, that's the coolest thing you've ever done, right? But to answer your question, why are people high on Drake May? The highs are just really cool. There is this, control over the chaos thing that he really thrives in chaotic situations and has all these really cool highlight things. I haven't seen the videos that you're talking about, but I'm sure Kurt Benkert points out some of the stuff with his footwork that everybody points out, the accuracy. There's some inconsistencies there that make people lower on him. And hey, look, there are people in the league, there, at least it's been reported that there are, and I'm sure that it's true, that have him as like QB4 below like JJ McCarthy or whatever. There are a lot of people in my YouTube comments that will insist that Mike Penix is better too. So like you're not on you're not on entirely solitary ground there. Having Spencer Rattler over him is a scorcher for sure. But it's talent, right? It's arm talent, it's ceiling, it's potential and all that stuff. And it's, hey, if we can fix this little mechanical thing, we've got NFC Josh Allen, right? That's if he goes to an NFC team, of course. Like that's the logic, I guess, of Drake May if you're looking for someone to explain it to you. Similarly, Skull and Crossbones asks, who do I trust draft analyst wise? I'm trying to check my work. Trying to get me in trouble a little bit here, but my answer is going to be a really lame one. You trust yourself, right? Because if you go just blindly trusting in somebody else and they give you the wrong answer, you're just going to kind of be wrong and not get anything out of it. But if you trust yourself and you get the wrong answer, you learn why you did that, right? If I just like go couch all of Dane Brugler's opinions, okay, yeah, I'll probably have some decent draft opinions. I'll be reasonably well informed. I'll be right on some, I'll be wrong on some. And the ones I'm wrong on, well, Dane Brugler can probably learn from that, but I can't really learn anything about myself from that. I just kind of have to hope Dane Brugler gets better, right? So if you're just going to like blindly trust somebody else, you're going to stunt your own growth. So trust yourself. Go be wrong with reckless abandon. It's okay. Like the guy who likes Spencer Rattler over Drake May, do it. Go for it. If you're right, it is awesome. If you're wrong, you learn. There's no bad thing that can happen here, as long as you're not like a huge jerk about it and then people start bullying you online. Don't do that, right? Be humble still, but have conviction, I guess, and humility. If you can balance those two, you're doing pretty good. If you are looking for a more objective answer to that, I guess I'll point you to Wide Left. Arif Hassan's doing all of his consensus board stuff and has actually published sort of a ranking on how people's big boards have done over the years. And all of his methodology and stuff is in that. So you can go check that out. I think Tony Pauline's is really good. I want to say Kyle Krabs did great. There's a couple names. I forget who all the other ones are. You can go over there for that though. Anti-Gravity asks, even before his suspension, we've heard very little about Wes Phillips' involvement in the QB conversation. Also timing his suspension during QB interviews. Is there anything we should read into that? Nah, I think that's just a facet of being the coordinator on the side the head coach came from. We had a lot of these same conversations with like George Edwards or whatever when it was Mike Zimmer, and then later like Andre Patterson and stuff. It's like it's the offense guy is Kevin O'Connell, and Wes Phillips has his job, has his role. I'm sure he's in all he was before he got suspended in all the meetings he was supposed to be in and all that stuff. If no news doesn't necessarily mean bad news, unless you're like really looking for something to make up. Derek Morin asks, wouldn't it be preferred to give up a 2025 first instead of 2026? The drafted QB, especially on a trade up, will get next year to develop no matter what. We want the 2026 first in case he doesn't work out. Yeah, that's too early to make that call, though. He's going to get 2 years to develop. And especially if you're taking somebody that needs a little bit of work, like possibly Drake May might need a year to even see where he's at all, let alone give him a year of playing time to go, right? Like that, there's so absolutely worlds where you draft a QB, he doesn't start this year, he does start in 2025, and it goes great, right? And then there are worlds where he's struggled. I mean, look at Josh Allen, right? He struggled for a couple of years, and Josh Allen is for a lot of reasons, a similar quarterback to Drake May. He struggled for 2 years, and then I think injecting Stephon Diggs into that helped a lot, but also just taking a step forward in 2020, and then suddenly he was the best. You need to apply patience here. Patience is a non-negotiable thing. Patience is not optional when it comes to QB development. If you are going to look at a QB's rookie season and then write him off if it's not good, you absolutely will grind your franchise to a nub. You will lose out on so many possible opportunities to get a good quarterback. You will just bust out a whole bunch and you'll be fired before you know it. It's a terrible way to be. You must be patient with quarterback. And I know that's really hard to ask of people. I know that crowds tend to be impatient. Fan bases tend to be like super instant gratification. If you listen to this show and you're impatient about the QB, then you're not listening to this show closely enough. Okay. You got to be patient with him, and saying we want the 2026 first in case we want to move on from the rookie after 2 years that we just traded a bunch of first rounders for. No, bad idea. Bad process. Purple and Gold Hero asks, if you had to cut a QB immediately after drafting one, which one? Mullins has more years in the system, but Hall is younger and has a better chance of being a long-term backup. So I'm actually pretty glad I don't have to make this decision right now, because the answer is obviously they compete in camp, whoever loses the competition. But if I don't get to use camp, Probably Nick Mullins, because they do already have Sam Darnold provides the veteran experience, right? And then you have like kind of a random Devy guy sitting waiting in the wings just in case can be sort of interesting. But like the existence of Sam Darnold sort of makes Mullins a little more obsolete, but not if Mullins is still better than Jaren Hall, because you need Jaren Hall to prove that he deserves that roster spot. He should get a chance to prove that he deserves that roster spot, but like he's got to do it. Like there is absolutely like an impetus there's an onus on him in this camp to like do something here and prove that he deserves one of those 53. Shadow Flame asks, since the draft is coming, would you take the over or under 43 and a half minutes from the start of the draft before the Vikings pick a player? I think you set this low. I'm going to take the over. Because so what always happens in the TV of it all is, even though the Bears will instantly take Caleb Williams, they will let the whole 15-minute clock run down. And I think some of that is just so that the TV broadcast can make enough of a moment out of it, and they're going to want to make a whole meal out of it. But sure, some of it is also, hey, what if somebody calls and offers us Patrick Mahomes or some crazy wild crap happens, right? Like we might as well let the clock run out. Even though we all know what they're going to do and there's not really a lot of intrigue to it, it still like strategically behooves them to let the clock run out. So that's 15. Essentially, we're going, is this, if the only way the under hits here is if the Vikings get up to 3, which is only one of the many outcomes that could happen, and if that transpires fairly quickly. So I think I'm on pretty safe ground taking the over here. But hey, check in on me on this. I love this question. I love this prop. I would love this. Remember Shadow Flame and hit me up with it when you get the answer. Heading into rapid fire mode a little bit already, and then a lot next so that I can get to as many of your questions as possible. So let's keep going. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to get last-minute tickets and last-minute deals. Look, when you are up to the very start of an event, or even an hour into the event, you can do this with Gametime. People are just trying to get rid of their tickets, and Gametime can leverage that, pass the savings on to you. Up to 60% off of buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so on. You can even save more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or whatever it is. You can, of course, get their all-in pricing. That means you can see your checkout total up front and no hidden random fees or anything like that. They want to be honest with you, and they want to show you what that seat's view is, so you can make sure you're satisfied with that as well. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Continuing on here with this episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. The next one comes from Sketchconk, who asks, barely been hearing his name recently with others getting touted. What's the chance that Chop Robinson falls into the late second and we can trade up, or is it going to be star-crossed lovers? Trading up from where? From like 108 to into the late second? That's too much. I don't think that like that's a really weird spot in the board to get there, because a fourth rounder is so much less than a second rounder that you would probably need to like trade a third rounder or something like that, which the Vikings don't have, and also would be trading the third rounder up. Like if the 108 is the biggest asset in that trade, you'd have to do like a next year second or something wild like that to get up. So I don't think that's possible. And the other thing is, I still am kind of holding fast that I think Chop goes sooner than people are saying. But I think he should be a first. If he's not a first rounder, people are overreacting to size, in my opinion. But you know me, I'm huge on Chop Robinson. James Kunow says, you talked about in an earlier episode there being a difference between a player having a great first step or burst versus timing the snap. As the latest of persons, how can I tell the difference live so I can look smart in front of my friends? You got to have a really quick eye if you want to do it live. I can't see that kind of thing live. But if you want to know, like the way I do it is like, I have to frame by frame to see it, because we're talking split seconds here. But if you frame by frame, when the ball moves, is the guy moving at the same time as the ball? Then he's not reacting, right? Human reaction times aren't that quick. But if the ball moves and he is moving at the same time as everybody else on the field, and he's just getting close, getting further forward, that's a great first step. That's a dominant first step. So is it that he's moving early, or that he's just getting more out of that first movement? Ryan asks, is anything going to change tight end usage-wise with Hawk out and the best tight end 3 in the league in? Johnny Munt, baby. That's a great question. I would assume yes. It's a different group of people, different skill sets, different talents, different deficiencies. I would assume they would do something different. Probably wouldn't use as much 12 personnel if that's what you're trying to get at, right? I don't think they like feature role Johnny Munt, but like sometimes they do that. So maybe they will. I don't think they should. Maybe that's the way I should say. I don't think they should, but I don't know. Sometimes Kevin O'Connell gets real Johnny Munty. you just can't shake him out of that mood. It also comes into opportunity with like who else you have on the field, right? Like if they draft some 5th round wide receiver that's exploding, then they're going to say, yeah, if this tight end stuff, we're going to go 11P all the time. Like they have somebody else they're really excited about, they'll use that guy. Maybe it's a lot of CJ Ham. MN Sports Appreciator says, Aura is dead. How does this affect the new QB? This is in reference to Shaq Griffin wearing number 1. He's gonna wear jersey number 1, which is awful. It's fantastic if you're a really good cornerback. But if you're even just an okay cornerback and you're gonna get burned if you're just okay, like sometime it's gonna happen. Getting burned in number 1 is just this devastating aesthetic. I mean, truly, it's catastrophic. So Aura is dead. You're correct. How does this affect the new QB? If Aura is dead, then drafting Drake May is worse. That's true. But Aura might not be dead because I think number 2 still has some aura wearing number 2. That's still a pretty good number to wear. There's also, I still would reiterate, 8 and 17, I think are fairly versatile numbers. I think many different styles of QB can work with those 2 numbers. So I'm totally good with that. 19 is a catastrophe if we get like JJ McCarthy and he wears 19. It's time to start calling 911. Nathan Holtz asks, coming from a Viking/Volunteers fan, would you please cease and desist? Absolutely not. Go back to college and go to a better one. Eric K asks, I know you've mentioned it here and there over the years, but in the spirit of us all learning even more, can you speak more about your main sources for learning more about football? What are your go-tos for information? Love it. Okay. My go-tos right now, I mean, it's evolved over the years, right? Like there was a time on this show where I would be like, I love Warren Sharp's website. We've grown, okay? We've gotten better. You can't arrest me for that. I would say if you are just an interested party, and I would say you're at like the Madden level of knowledge, right? Where you play some Madden, so you know what cover 3 is and stuff like that. You know what a sale concept is because you play Madden, that kind of thing. If you have that level of knowledge, then I would say the next evolution is to get the like history books, like the Doug Farrar books, the Crispy Brown books, Art of Smart Football, Take Your Eye Off the Ball, Blood, Sweat, and Chalk is a great book. Those books are great because like for that particular level of knowledge, where they'll get you thinking less in just like memorizing coverages and more in like the strategy of why one thing countered another. Why was Tampa 2 the thing that Tony Dungy brought to Vikings games to handle Randy Moss? Like, why did that work? What was the point? What was the threat? What was the answer to that threat? And thinking of it that way. A lot of those books will give you a great sense for that dynamic. And then once you're sort of familiar with that, or your brain is good at thinking in that way, then I would recommend books like Cameron Saran books or Bobby Peters books that are a little bit more nitty gritty. The Cam Saran book is a little dated now. The pass coverage glossary, I have it in my bookshelf behind me if you're watching on YouTube. And I have it behind me featured sometimes because I do think that it was a really good book to open my eyes a little bit. I think a lot of the material in it is probably outdated by now in terms of the way that coverages work. A lot of them don't work that way anymore because things just adapt over the years. But it's still a good way to learn how to think in the terms of a system, in the terms of like, okay, if this, you get a lot of like, that book is not an interesting read. Like it is a dry read. It is it's like a rule book. But you kind of start to notice the patterns of, oh, okay, anytime the safety does this, the apex has to do that because he's taking he's taking over that space or he's refilling it, or here's what these calls are worth and stuff. So that was really helpful to me to just encourage my brain to think a different way. I love that stuff. And then once you do that, then it starts to become clinics. But honestly, maybe the best thing in the world is to find a local high school and volunteer as a coach. And even if you're volunteering in a sort of hands-off way or something like that, get involved. Nothing better than hands-on experience, or at least just get to know those people. Ask your local staff questions. Most coaches, basically any high school coach I've ever talked to, has always been super, super excited to tell me stuff. And it's been life-changing in terms of the amount of stuff I've been able to learn just from people who are like, yeah, I'll get a coffee with you. Let's talk scheme. Like, it happens. You can absolutely do that. Just ask. JJ McCarthy asks, I'm getting married in the fall. Hey, congratulations, man. And I thought your wedding disaster bets were really cool. Any other cool wedding things you guys did? Would love other fun ideas. So renting a petting zoo is cheaper than you think. And boy, does that really put things over the top. That's the one I'll give you. Do a petting zoo, especially if there's a lot of kids coming. But honestly, like, we did it because the bride is very into animals and wanted a petting zoo and wanted to be able to pet a goat at her wedding and hold a chinchilla. And we did that, and it rocked, and everyone loved it and had a great time with it. Gary Melbreck asks, will the wife have to leave the room in a close Vikings game? So, no. Part of growing up is learning how to watch sports games with other people without being obnoxious. That's part of being a grown-up now. But also, now my process when I watch a Vikings game is like, I do a lot of rigorous note taking that's like live. So I'm like usually pretty locked into that. And it sort of makes it so that the reactions aren't that crazy. That said, I almost insist that she does because she is good luck. She's watched 2 games with me. One was the entire Bills game in 2022, or 2 games with me, like start to finish lately, that she wasn't like at, because sometimes we'll go to one. But she was at 2021 Chargers. Fantastic game. Vikings win. She watched the entire 2022 Bills game with me. Fantastic game. Vikings win. She showed up at halftime of the Colts game, the 33-0 Colts game. Fantastic game. Vikings win. So I sort of insist that she is here as much as she wants to be, but she usually doesn't care. So she'll show up sometimes, but usually she'll like use that time that I'm holed up in here to bake and get something done, or, you know, have fun with a cool project or something like that. Okay, that's all I'm going to do for now. I will see you guys all tomorrow, and as always, Skull.